Real Madrid keep nipping at Barcelona's heels after a statement win against Valencia. Is Benzema going to be a thing? And La Liga action continues on beIN Sports. Barcelona getting their first real test in Sevilla. The man on the call joins us to discuss that game and more on Sports Burst, which starts now. Happy Juneteenth, big soccer heads. I'm Eric Krakauer. I've been handed the keys to the show, so expect a bumpy ride with plenty of sharp turns. Happy you're along for the ride. Make sure you leave your comments and questions below. I'll try to get them as often as possible. Before we get started, here's a look at what's in store for you on beIN Sports Extra. La Liga Smart Bank action. Elche hosts Girona. Two teams vying for a promotion playoff spot. There's also plenty of Turkish Super League football this weekend as well. beIN Sports Extra is free, no strings, no contracts. You can watch through Roku channel, Samsung TV Plus, Pluto TV, Xumo, and even over the air across the U.S. Go to beinsportsextra.com for more details. 3 games available on beIN Sports and beIN Sports Español today. Plucky Granada welcome Villarreal. A relegation 6-pointer between Mallorca and Leganés will air simultaneously on beIN Sports Español. And the headliner, Sevilla, Barcelona. All right, so the man who will call that game, one half of an iconic commentary duo whose poster adorns my bedroom wall, Phil Schoen, is with us. Welcome, Phil.
I don't know how to answer that one. You know, it's me and Cindy Crawford. What can I say?
No, I don't think my fiancé would allow that. We kick things off with Real Madrid's defeat of Valencia at Alfredo Di Stefano Stadium. It ended 3-0. All goals scored in the second half. Benzema bagged the brace. Marco Asensio marked his return with a goal, scored with his first touch. An impressive second 45. Phil, you were on the call for that game. Was the result indicative of Madrid's dominance, or does it flatter to deceive?
I would say it's more indicative because you take a look at what happened. This was a game that was very competitive throughout, from the opening kickoff to the half. Valencia was a little unfortunate not to put a goal on the board, and that's what you need when you're taking on one of the giants. Second half, though, with the adjustments that Zidane made, you could start to sense the momentum building, and Valencia was being pushed deeper and deeper. A lot of times during these games that have been coming back since the break, when the substitutes come in, and 10 of them combined, things start to go a little wobbly. But for Real Madrid, it was a little bit different because that's when things really started to click, and each goal seemed to be better than the last. That's
actually something we're going to talk about later on in the show, the impact of substitutes or lack thereof. Now, in the first half, you saw Rodrigo hit the post. There were a couple of chances for Valencia. Do you think we would have seen a significantly different scoreline had they scored on their opportunities, particularly that shot from Rodrigo? Of course, he had a goal disallowed correctly after being reviewed by VAR.
Well, I think it could have been a little bit different. I'm not exactly sure it would have because in many ways for games like this, with teams like this, Real Madrid, the Barcelonas of the world, they're not competing against the opposition. They're competing against themselves because when they play up to their capability, there's no one else in La Liga that can stand with them. So I kind of have a feeling that if that Rodrigo goal would have gone in, it very well could have been a wake-up call. But I do think that when you take a look at what Solades got out of his team, they were unfortunate not to be up a goal, maybe even 2 at the half, but I still have a feeling, just the way that Zidane has guided this team, especially here in the second stint, that the offense would have shown up in the second half. It might have looked closer on the scoreboard, but again, I think Real Madrid is a closer.
And certainly a statement win. We got some comments coming in. Andrew Conturo, Asensio equals game changer. Well, maybe for the future. The one goal had already gone in, but he certainly made an impression. Mo Sadi, Asensio, how we missed you. And Mark Golden, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this one. Hey, Eric, great to see you in the chair. Thank you very much. Asensio did score his first goal back from injury. How important is that to Madrid, and how punishing is it to Gareth Bale, who was in the stands? There was an ISO cam pointed at him throughout. You commented on his status quo right now at the club.
Well, I think it wouldn't have made that much of a difference because Gareth Bale is in a situation where if Zidane needs what he can bring to the table, he will use him. Asensio's a little bit different. And I think the one thing, put it this way, the time where Gareth Bale was expected to be a spark for Real Madrid is long gone. I think, again, it's going to be very situational. But what Asensio did do is show that he can be a spark. 330 days on the shelf since the injury against Arsenal in the ICC in the offseason, and he scores with his first touch. You can say the goal itself was brilliant, but I think just the way that he moved, he rotated, he called to get to that, all leading up to the shot. He also set up the third goal as well. Don't forget that. But I think what Asensio did was move himself up the pecking order. He was already likely ahead of Gareth Bale. He could only have gone down. He did not. One other thing to consider, Zidane himself. For a guy that had the playing career that he did, you could almost imagine it would be like talking down to players that are not as good as he was. But he's not that way. He's a very humble man. He's a very much of a motivator, very personable, and he finds a way to get the most out of his team. And that little I don't want to say confrontation or altercation, but that little tete-a-tete with Asensio just before he came on. He knew Marco had to be a little bit nervous because of spending nearly a year on the shelf. He knew that in the scoreline that it was, that Asensio also might feel a little bit of pressure. So what did Zidane do? Cracked a joke, made him smile, took the pressure off, and Asensio goes out and turns it into a goal.
And he celebrates with a smile as well, right? A little hand gesture, he points to Zidane, so that certainly had a lot of impact.
One other thing, Eric, also, and this is something that Ray pointed out, it wasn't just for Zidane, it wasn't just for Asensio, but the fact that he was able to get out there and make the impact that he did is a reason for the entire squad to get a lift. Now, not saying that's going to carry much, especially with all of these games in a condensed time, but that was a huge emotional uplift for the entire team.
Maybe not for Gareth Bale, who is going to see his time become even more limited. Let's go back to the comments very quickly. Ryan Moran, I do not like Madrid at all, but this started almost like a poem.
Does he like green eggs and ham? Just
yeah,
curious.
I was going to say, there you go. But Marco Asensio, take a bow, lad. What an amazing return after 330 days and a massive injury. I'm happy for him. And it seems like every time Asensio has a sort of debut, he has an impact. He scored in his very first game in the Champions League, very first game in the Copa del Rey, and his very first game, very first touch coming back from that long injury. Jude Patrick Alexis, that was unfortunately a great win for Madrid. Unfortunately, obviously, I guess he's not a Real Madrid fan, which spoiled my evening as I was planning to watch the game from DVR with a bottle of wine if they had lost. Well, I hope you still enjoyed that bottle of wine. Benzema, the star of the show, perhaps in this game. He's only the fourth Real Madrid player to score 20-plus goals in 8 or more seasons. Are we still undervaluing this Frenchman, Phil?
I don't know if we could undervalue, but I think, again, the way that he's used for Real Madrid, the way that Zidane can get the most out of him, and especially when you take a look 2-3 years ago when he was going through all of his legal battles, the way that he was able to keep him focused and get the performances that he needed, I think he is a perfect fit for this Real Madrid. And you take a look at what was going on before, with the Gonzalo Higuain-Benzema battle, you knew that Zidane had an idea of what he got from Benzema. And while Higuain, especially at that time, could be the fox in the box, a poacher, maybe for everyone but Argentina, the one thing that you get with Karim Benzema is the ability to morph himself, especially when Ronaldo was there, to be able to be the second fiddle. And now he's getting a chance to step up into the big chair, into the big spotlight, and he's doing that. But even then, most of the performance yesterday was out wide. They were even using that to flood Modric up the middle. We saw it with Valverde. He's just so versatile, and he fits in perfectly.
And that sort of verticality is what makes Real Madrid so dangerous, and Hazard adds a different dimension, which I've mentioned before, just driving at defenders, and that synchronicity that he has with Benzema, is that something that we should be very excited about? Look, I pointed out that he was going to be the impact player coming back from his injury and as La Liga resumed, and it certainly seems to be that way.
Well, again, I kind of brought this up, and it wasn't so much to throw a dagger, but just to paint the comparison that I've seen on the internet and in some of the stories. You look at Eden Hazard when the stoppage started up again, and it was 1 goal, 1 assist. and people were saying that he was having an impact and that he was fitting in well with Real Madrid. You look at Antoine Griezmann, 8 goals and 4 assists, and people saying he's having a disastrous campaign with Barcelona. But you know what? If you watch the games, you can see how you can get that. With Antoine Griezmann, he just doesn't look comfortable. It looks like it's Barcelona as a second language. But with Eden Hazard, you could just see, especially now that he's fit, he's filling in. Now he has an assist in each game. He was a little unfortunate not to get a goal against Eibar. I think it's a very good fit, and if he can stay focused and sharp, I think the sky's the limit.
All right, let's go to some more comments here from Real Madrid fans and rivals. Leonga Martin Monono, Rodrigo should be sold or loaned. He is not good enough for Real Madrid. Wow, that's pretty harsh considering how he started the season. John Ice, Zizou finally has his front three. Let's see how they will blossom. Let's indeed. Mo Sadi, after yesterday's performance, I think Bale will be sitting on the bench for a long time. I don't think you're alone in feeling that way. Rich Murray, Mendy did great assisting Asensio. He did find him. Poor defensive effort from Valencia there. If he can do similarly more often, he will be the player Real need going forward in defense and in attack. Well, let's move on to another Real Sociedad. They blew it for a second consecutive game, losing to Alaves 2-0. That's 1 point out of 6 in these first 2 games. How much trouble, Phil, is La Real in right now?
Well, we talked about before how some teams appreciated the world coming to a stop just by the way things were going. La Real was one of those that was not the case. What was it, 8 straight without defeat coming into before La Liga packed it up, and now they come back and they can't get the engine started again. This is a team that's dangerous, but it's also a team that's relatively young, and it is a team that can ride emotional waves. And right now, that wave is a tsunami headed in the wrong direction. You look at Alex Isaac, you look at William José. Those are the 2 players up in the middle. And I know William José got off to a good start, and when he slowed, Isaac stepped in. But both of them are shooting blanks at the moment, and they really need a little bit more out of Odegaard. The fact that Otamendi's coming back could add some composure. But again, this is a team that has lost the plot, and they don't have a lot of time to get it back.
Otamendi coming back from an injury he suffered against Athletic Club Bilbao in the 3rd week. And Real Sociedad just 1 shot on target against Alaves. Alaves difficult to beat at home, but really not good enough for a team that is vying for a top 4 spot. Real Sociedad next face Real Madrid. Worth noting, they beat Real Madrid at the Bernabeu to make the Copa del Rey final, that unprecedented final against Athletic Club, which we don't exactly know what's going to happen with it, given that both teams want to play in front of fans. And given what we've seen, what do you expect to happen very quickly?
I have a feeling that this is going to be Real Madrid, and it might not even take till the half before they wake up. The one interesting point, again, is going to be Odegaard, because he has a reason to prove something against his perhaps future boss. We'll find out what happens, but I think everything is looking Real Madrid's way right now.
Yeah, I think so, but this could be that kind of game that motivates La Real to get back on track. Sevilla and Atletico Madrid now in the top 4. Both of them look like a sure thing, especially after Atletico Madrid's emphatic win at Osasuna, who stole 2 points from La Real. All right, let's get to the big one at the Pizjuan today. Sevilla hosting Barcelona in what is really Barca's first test, as I said earlier, after collecting all 3 points against Mallorca and Leganés, 2 teams that are trying to claw their way out of the bottom, out of that relegation zone. We've seen 2 different attacking trios in the first 2 games. Who do you think should get the nod today, and how difficult of a hurdle do you think this is going to be at the Sánchez Pizjuan?
Well, they've been working Luis Suarez back in. He got, about 15 minutes the first game, about 30 minutes the second game. And if you have a doubt, maybe it's better to start him, because then you can always pull him rather than maybe having to make a substitute to a substitute. Although, again, you now have 5 substitutes, so you have a little bit more leeway. I have a feeling we're probably still going to see Messi and Griezmann. And that last one, I wouldn't be surprised to see Fati get another opportunity. And maybe you bring in Suarez at the half. I think, again, for Quique Setien, he has no reason to panic. They're still in front. While Real Madrid is picking up speed, Barcelona still has that inside lane.
Yeah, Ansu Fati better start some more games, considering that Barcelona turned down a $150 million offer, if you're to believe reports. Who knows who that suitor was. You know, you mentioned Griezmann before, and before I move to Lopetegui and what he said in the press conference after they dropped 2 points, Griezmann has been much maligned, especially by Barcelona fans, but he remains in the lineup, and it seems that Quique Setién thinks that he is an important piece in that attacking triad.
Absolutely. And in fact, if I remember the exact quote, and it was translated, is the fact that he's pretty much an automatic starter. Doesn't mean he's going to be around at the finish, because they do have a lot of weapons right now. And especially with the return of Luis Suarez, it gives them some opportunities. But I do think that Griezmann has done better than he's been criticized. However, again, you watch the way that he plays, and it still doesn't look fluid. He's being forced further out wide or further up high than he was used to playing at Atletico or with France. He's better as a second striker, as an inside channel pair. That's not the way Barcelona plays, though, and he's going to have to adapt.
Yeah, and he's had to adapt to various positions, as you mentioned, almost playing as a false nine in the first game back, and a lot of dummies, trying to get Messi involved, trying to get Braithwaite involved as well. I think we need to take it easy with the criticism, considering how much he's had to learn on the run, and the fact that he is playing second fiddle, or maybe even third fiddle, to Messi and Suarez on this team, where he was the main man at Atletico Madrid. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about Sevilla. Lopetegui dropped 2 points against Levante right at the tail end of that game after impressively brushing Betis aside in their opener. You called that game. He's taken responsibility for the substitutions, which have really been criticized and called into question. A reminder that they can be helpful, 5 substitutions, as much as detrimental. Was he right to take responsibility?
Well, absolutely. It eventually comes down to the boss regardless. And he's made a few interesting choices. We're not sure how much of it is health, because we didn't hear any reports of injury. We did have the Sevilla 4 when they broke curfew and quarantine, and some integral members were among those. And in my mind, the guy that pulls the strings for Sevilla is Ever Banega. And he was one of those 4. Maybe it was a disciplinary issue why he didn't start that opening game. But at the same point, he hasn't looked razor sharp. Maybe it's something Lopetegui's seen in practice as well. They need to get him back on track. They need to get a little bit more out of Ocampos, who has been facing a little bit of a niggling injury since they've returned to training. And De Jong, again, who was just starting to get comfortable, seems to have gone ice cold again.
Well, as we've mentioned on this show before, Lopetegui not getting much love at the Sanchez-Pizjuan. I don't think the fans are completely convinced of his abilities, even though Monchi seems to be on his side. And I think we saw against Levante why that is the case. They were ahead, and then they dropped their lines very deep, inviting the pressure from Levante. Levante, who went to Mestalla a few days earlier and managed to steal a couple of points away from Valencia as well. Is he courageous enough, do you think, to remain at the helm of this Sevilla team, a team that has a lot of European ambitions?
Well, I would say yes, but he's going to have to be a little bit more courageous than he has shown. If you're talking about a Real Madrid, we obviously saw what happened there. Maybe you could say it's unfair, but Real has demanding standards. When he left Spain, it was a little different. It was because of the Real Madrid situation. He'd actually done quite well, even though they weren't quite the furia of the Roja that they were before. So I do think Sevilla, though, is one of those teams that's trying to lift itself up. They are the underdogs. One of the reasons Monchi is so valuable, his ability to get something out of nothing practically. But Lopetegui needs to keep that something alive. With Vaclik, they have a very solid goalkeeper. You look at Koundé, who has, I think, been an amazing discovery this year, and Diego Carlos very solid on the back line as well. With Reguilon, they're getting a lot out of that defense, but it's that adventurousness. And again, a lot of that goes to Ever Banega. I think that Oliver has played very well, especially following the restart. Maybe they need a little bit more out of Jordan, but he did very well for the first 28 games. They need to try and get something up front. They need to get something to go their way. And sometimes you got to gamble. And that really hasn't been Lopetegui's way.
I think gamble is an important word to use here. Of course, you can watch that game today. It's live and exclusive on beIN Sports, and you can listen to Phil as well as Ray Hudson. The coverage begins at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a must not miss game, and the first test, as I mentioned, for Barcelona since the resumption of the league. They've been cruising so far. But of course, Sevilla and Barcelona is not the only game on tap. Two fast starters since the COVID-4 suspension. Granada and Villarreal face each other. Granada managed two remontadas, beating Getafe 2-1 and drawing Betis 2-2. Villarreal making it 6 points out of 6 after beating Celta and Mallorca, both with their eyes on Europe. Villarreal not too far from the top 4 spot. Granada unbeaten in 6. Whom do you fancy, Phil?
I would say it's Villarreal just for the simple fact, and we've seen it throughout, that home field advantage is nowhere near as powerful when there isn't actually home fans in the stands. I agree with you. Villarreal, 5 points from Champions League? And you take a look at Granada, just 2 points further adrift. But Villarreal seems to be clicking a little bit more. You talked about the bounce backs, but sometimes you're going to reach for the switch and it's not going to be there. I think that this is going to be a close match, but I do think Villarreal just enough difference in quality to get the job done.
It took a late goal from Villarreal against Celta. It was a little bit easier in the second game. Well, against Mallorca, not easy, but they did score earlier. One of the stories of this game, one of the subplots, is that Bruno Soriano is back after a 3-year absence through injury. We do know that it's a knee injury, but the team has been a little bit cryptic and mysterious in terms of disclosing just what it was that ailed the captain for 3 long years. So a really good game. The reverse fixture ended 4-4. One of the men on the score sheet was Roberto Soldado. He hasn't scored too many from open play, although he did get that leveler against Betis in the dying embers. Well, we now know the Champions League will wrap up in Lisbon, city of my birth, so I'm very proud. The odds are out. Phil, if you were a betting man, and you aren't because betting is a no-no, whom would you put your money on to win it all?
Well, it is illegal at Bushwood, maybe not illegal in Medley. I would say, well, again, if you are going to do it, you want to make it worth your while. So you don't look at the favorites. You don't look at a Manchester City. Barcelona looks to be, especially what we've seen right now, not a bad buy, but the one for me that's really jumping out is Real Madrid. Yeah. What's it, 33-1? And they've been one of the best teams since the comeback. Yeah, and it looks like they're getting better. It's
pretty amazing. I mean, we saw Manchester City absolutely steamroll your team, Arsenal. We'll talk about that in a second. Bayern Munich, a lot of people's favorite. Real Madrid really does stand out. And Atalanta, I understand that they're not exactly the odds-on favorite, but everybody that they've played, except for those first 3 group games, they seem to lambast. So what do you make of their chances?
I think Atalanta's chances, or let's say their payoff, came just by making the group making it to the knockout stage. And when I just took a look at the way that the schedule was, I knew even though that they were struggling 4 games in, just the way the last 2 games were, they were winnable games for them and almost impossible for the opposition. I knew that they would make it to the knockout stage. At this point, they're playing, well, since we're on the parlance, house money. I don't think they're going to get much more after this. Great point by our producer. We take a look at Napoli, who actually have an advantage in their dead last. Was it 80-1? I think it gives you an idea. Maybe they're still celebrating their Copa win. Yeah. That I have a feeling that they're probably going to be off at the next exit.
Against Juve. Remember that those odds were for entertainment purposes only. Very quickly, Phil, we don't have much time. 2 Premier League topics. The Premier League is also back today. Tottenham hosts Manchester United, both in the hunt for a top 4 finish. It's Mourinho back against his former employer. Spurs have not won in 3, and that's why Mourinho is under pressure. United undefeated in 5 games, 4 wins. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says Pogba is ready to make an impact in 30 seconds or less. How much does Pogba have to prove at Manchester United?
Everything. In my mind, what he's done for France has been amazing. It gives you faith, gives you hope. But if you're a Manchester United fan, you really haven't seen that much. Maybe just before the break after the new year, you were starting to see him impose himself a little bit. But this is the type of game, and I'm not quite sure he has it done. I agree with you 100%. Mourinho, he thrives on emotion, and this is one of those emotional games where he has a chance to prove himself. I just have a feeling with Harry Kane coming back and everything set up, Spurs are going to find a way. And as an Arsenal fan, that's not easy to say.
Well, you know which player is really going to show up in that game, and that's Bruno Fernandes, who, of course, is going to be the next Ballon d'Or winner.
Where's he from?
Portugal.
Okay.
And Sporting, of course, my Sporting. Phil, we'll finish off the show by focusing on your team. You're a masochistic Arsenal fan.
They're saying we're out of time.
No, we are not out of time. Big loss at the Etihad. David Luiz in the headline grabber for all the wrong reasons. His contract is up at the end of the season. If it were your choice, would you extend it?
No, because Arteta's still going to be there. I think that David Luiz can still play a role in the right system with the right players around him. I still like him. But it was a hat trick of mistakes. All that was missing was an own goal. He's lost confidence, and Arteta doesn't have any to give.
Yeah, look, I think I would extend his contract as well. I think he still has a future at that club. He just has very, very poor luck. All right. As we come to an end, remember that free football is on beIN Sports Extra this weekend. LaLiga, Smartbank, and the Turkish Super League. All free this weekend. Stay tuned to beIN Sports for the rest of the day. Previews, games, and the Express wrap-up are all coming up with Gab Amato. You'll even see this face. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend, big soccer heads. Thank you for joining us, Phil. Until next time.